We are live streaming episode 118 on the Real Kyper at Noon show. Actually, maybe for the first time in our brief history, we might be a little earlier than at noon. And there's only one reason for that. Doug McLean isn't on the show. We're not screaming at him just prior to going to air. Put your phone down, Mac. We know Mac's traveling. He's in his RV. He wanted to come on the show today, but we didn't have great reception. He had suggested tying two cans together with a piece of string, something that he was accustomed to growing up in PEI. I said, it won't work, Mac. We've advanced this thing far beyond that. So what do? We one up Mac. We go get people better than Mac, more knowledgeable, better looking, and certainly have a better house. Not that crammed in condo, man. We're going with the Taj Mahal today. We're going to Minnesota. We're going with Brian Lawton. Lots, what's going on?
Not much, Kipper. Delight to be here. I always get nervous when you give it to Max so much because he's the type of guy that'll say it to me he'll be bitter at me when I see him for absolutely no reason. I didn't say anything. I may have agreed with you on a lot of it, but I didn't say it.
You're guilty by association. So he is just going to be mad at you, even though I teed it up.
Yeah, I never thought I'd say this. I miss the days when we all worked together at Sportsnet and Mac was there all the time. I miss him. I miss that dry humor, that far out view of the world, that everything is horrible, and just the delightfulness of Mac.
It's horrible with a chuckle at the end. He is, yes. I think, the greatest ball buster, and we've come across lots. When we're in dressing rooms, year after year, we know there's two or three of them in a dressing room, and you got to be ready for everything. If your skin does not get thick in a real hurry in an NHL dressing room, it never will.
It would have been a delight, Kipper, to play either when Mac was a head coach or even when he was assistant, like way back when in Detroit, to have him as the assistant coach, who was always a little bit looser, a little more friendly with the players, just lobbing bombs left, right, and center would have been an absolute joy. And we were both playing then, of course, and I wish I had played for Mac. That would have been interesting, to say the least.
Well, we're appreciative of having that ball busting attitude on this show. This week he's traveling. We'll try to hunt him down for Friday's show, but we sure appreciate you stepping in today. And you are perfect in terms of our thumbnail. And we kind of teed it up. And I'm like, I don't know if I want to put the word circumvention on a thumbnail. Let's see if we can figure something out with this whole Nikita Kucherov situation. And so I went with hiding Kucherov. And lots, we're going to get into Tampa Bay and Florida and all the series. It's going to be a great hour here on the show. But I just thought, with Tampa Bay now being up 2-0, I think this becomes more of a story. And if Florida is to say, lose the series early, I think it's going to pour gasoline on the fire in terms of the whole Kucherov situation and how Tampa Bay, when we thought at the end of their Stanley Cup run was in a no-win situation, that the salary cap flat would have painted them in a corner, and we're going to see some great talent have to go somewhere else. It didn't happen. There wasn't much talk about any type of star player, let alone Kucherov, being in a situation where Tampa Bay could find a way to get $9.5 million off the books. And in this case, eyebrows were raised when it was announced that he was going to have surgery. He was going to miss the entire season. And just your thoughts, Lots, when you first heard about this scenario that Tampa Bay went with.
I mean, obviously, Kevin, when you're talking about surgeries and things like that, it's we've seen things over the history of the National Hockey League that really made you raise an eyebrow. But when you're talking about surgeries, you really can't do that. Now, did it work out incredibly convenient for the Tampa Bay Lightning? Yes, it did. I at that particular time period before that was announced, I was thinking, wow, they're going to lose some really good players. They're going to be a little bit like the Chicago Blackhawks when we saw them roll Andrew Ladd and Dustin Byfuglien out of there after winning a Stanley Cup because they just couldn't afford everybody. They had to go out and make some deals and they got back some value. I thought Tampa was headed for a little bit of a wash, rinse, repeat with the players that they had on their roster, having to re-sign guys like Sergachev and just to keep everybody in the mix. I thought at the very least they'd have to maybe buy out a guy like Tyler Johnson or maybe ship him out of town and pay someone to take him. He's a good player, but his cap hit and where he's at production wise the last few, I just thought we'd see all kinds of things like that. And then, like money from heaven, they got a convenient injury. Now, we can craft a story that makes it sound fictitious, but I mean, nobody wants to lose a former MVP, their leading point scorer. It worked out that way. General managers are the guys that are really responsible for these types of rules. The National Hockey League relies heavily on these guys for their input, and they certainly blessed what's gone on here previously. Do I think it might change in the future? Depends how it plays out for Tampa this year. But there's no doubt it was a huge break. It was a huge advantage for Tampa. You could say it any way you want. If you're a Florida Panthers fan, you'll certainly be screaming, that's cheating. They've gone above and beyond, but that to me is not correct. You can't say they purposely forced a guy to have an injury. Where it gets wonky and where people have raised a lot of red flags is the timing. What's the chances of the timing, Kipper?
Yes. Yes.
You
And
know,
that's it in a nutshell. And you said it. There's no way you're not cheating or you're not hiding surgery. And you're not convincing a player to do something he doesn't want to do either. That's the other thing, is that it just doesn't come up with an idea from Tampa Bay's management, but Kucherov has to give it the stamp of approval that he wants the surgery when he wants it. Lots. We know there are those type of injuries that need surgery right away, but how many times have we been in a scenario where it's either us or a teammate and you're like, wait for the surgery either at the end of the season or maybe even at the end of your career. But typically,
it happens.
You don't go to surgery right away unless you absolutely have to. That's you don't get cut unless you have to. And Kucherov understood this.
Yeah, he did. And you know, he wants to play hockey. He doesn't want to have a surgery. He doesn't want to sit out. You know, what do I think really happened with Julien Brisebois? I think he took the information and facts that were presented to the club, and he was very fortunate to be able to take advantage of this because you don't have the ability. It'd be nice if everybody could just kind of park a player for a year and maintain their roster, then bring them back and actually use them in that year, but not have them count against your salary cap and just do that at will. But it doesn't, that's not the way it works. And that's why, you know, people have said, well, it doesn't really pass the smell test to me, Lots. And you know what? It does. These were factors that were not manufactured by Nikita Kucherov, certainly not manufactured by the Tampa Bay Lightning's management team. And because of that, yeah, it's rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. Do I think that it will stay that way forever? I think people are watching very closely. I really do. I know Joel Quenneville was really clear. Hey, what they did, it was well within the rules. They didn't do anything wrong. We got to just deal with it. Now, Joel's a no excuse type guy too. He wants his players in the right frame of mind. But this, to me, I've been involved in some things in the past when I represented players. You know, we could take them out of college and put them in the OHL or the Western Hockey League or the Q, and you could actually change their status from a team owning their rights to eventually becoming an unrestricted free agency. I actually got deposed on this when I was an agent. And ultimately, it was ruled that it was totally legal, but it got changed after that. The next CBA, that particular rule, a lot of people called it a loophole, was cleaned up. Do I think that this is a loophole or rule that could be cleaned up? Yeah, I do. It depends on how it works out. It happens so infrequently, but if it happens just this year and Tampa Bay rolls on and wins the Stanley Cup, then I think there'll be general managers and management people around the league that'll say, you know what, that was legal, but we got to take a look at it and we got to maybe change that to some degree.
I want to get in more specifics and detail on that, but just to go back earlier, what you said about what doesn't necessarily pass the smell test with maybe Panther fans or even other fans around the league watching Tampa Bay strengthen their chance to win another Stanley Cup is the timing of this. So the rules are that once you're deemed medically cleared, you go back on the cap immediately. And this is where Tampa Bay looked like they were in no rush. Now, whether or not you believe that it was a 4-month injury or a 4 to 6 month injury, but he was skating for over a month, and clearly they could not bring him back. I mean, it was just a scenario where there was no room. It just couldn't happen. So just from Lots, your understanding as a former general manager, like whose responsibility is to medically clear Kucherov off this surgery? Is it the team doctor? Is it second opinion? Is it the Players Association? Like, if it's the team doctor, there could be a conflict of interest right there on the timing of this, on when he's cleared.
Yeah, there certainly could be. I was told that the league was very on top of watching this particular scenario. I don't know to what degree that means. Normally, your team doctor would clear you. Normally, it's not really a discussion point around the NHL in terms of what the repercussions are from this. It's more of a discussion point in terms of the club and the player. Those are the two entities that generally need to come together, and both parties agree, and boom, you move forward. That's it. In this particular case, because it had outside ramifications, I was told that the NHL looked very closely at it. What degree that is, I do not know. But I do believe that they were aware of it. I do think people raised the question. I do think it's an incredibly difficult spot for any, certainly for the league, for doctors to come in and know when a player is right to play, because it does take two. I didn't hear Nikita Kucherov stand up and be screaming that I'm healthy and ready to go beforehand. And I think without that, it's incredibly difficult for doctors to come in and say, well, you know what, you should be able to play right now. This whole deal worked out so beautifully for Tampa in terms of the timing that I don't think that you could do that. I think you would have had to have the player stand up and say, no, this is complete BS. I'm ready to go. I've been ready to go. And that didn't happen. I don't know why Nikita Kucherov would have done that, other than, the underlying theme, which is this guy wants to play hockey at the highest level in the world. And it's not really the stuff that we're talking about is stuff that management worries about, not the player. So I can see the argument. I could see people easily turning around Kyper, though, and saying, well, of course he didn't want to come back. Why would he want to come back? That would hurt his team. Well, he wants to play, too. It's not as cut and dry as that.
Lots, if we're talking about what is a $100 million, $110 million salary cap, then you look at the percentages of taking off $9.5 million. But when you're at an 80 and you were able to take off 12, 13% of your salary cap with this one move, it's a huge move. It's a game changer for Tampa Bay in their quest to win another Stanley Cup. Just speaking now in terms of, if the momentum grows and Tampa Bay finds a way of getting another Stanley Cup, the finger's going to get completely pointed in this direction. And then does that now put more pressure on the league or the Players Association to come up with something different? So teams in the future cannot hide players like Kucherov, because it's a legit tactic now for some teams to go out there and say, whether or not it's a player like Kucherov all season or I trade for one that's conveniently hurt, or I trade for a guy, have him sit on the sidelines until the cap disappears. Are we going to start seeing more of this?
I don't think so. I think it was a bit of a perfect storm for everything to come together. I do think that if it goes on and plays out the way you said, it may be something that the general managers bring to the league. The league will put it on the agenda and they'll discuss it. There's a billion ways that you could eliminate, change, almost even penalize the team if you have a player that's in that ilk, but not maybe penalize them as much as you would think. You may have to take for instance, you could take a percentage of the salary cap for a guy like
Kucherov's at
Kucherov.
9.5. Would you have capped the advantage to Tampa Bay at $4.5 million?
You could do a cap, you could do a percentage if you wanted to make it more level. There's a million ways to skin the cat. That's the league is faced with these problems all the time. The NHLPA is faced with it. Players are affected by it. That's normal course of business stuff. But to think that it may happen all the time, I still think it'll be very, very rare. This literally was a perfect storm. You had a team like Tampa that was in a cycle, that had some young players that were coming off ELS. Certainly in the last few years, you've seen guys like Point and Kucherov. There's a lot of management going on. You got a great team like they do. They've got multiple superstars. It's an embarrassment of riches for them when you have a Hedman and McDonough and a Stamkos and a Kucherov and a Vasilevsky and a Sergachev now. There's so many factors that had to play in this for it to work out the way that it did, that I just don't believe anybody's that smart in the National Hockey League in terms of the general managers. No disrespect to these guys. They're all very smart, but I'm being a little bit facetious. There's no one that could actually sit down and plan that out. It just happened. And that's what the rules are. And the rules are the way they are for logical reasons. You just make them up. I mean, when you don't have the services of a player, the salary cap would be unmanageable if you had to count that player under the cap. Just look at the Leafs. If they lost 3 players, they'd be out 30 on the cap. They wouldn't be able to field a team. So it's not like they do things blindly. There's a lot of thought that's gone into it. The National Hockey League has thoughts about how the salary cap should work. The Players Association has a completely different set of thoughts. Each individual team has a different position. You could very easily say, and I don't know this is a fact, but I could guess pretty firmly that a team like the Toronto Maple Leafs that is operating in a cap world, really wants to have a lot of opportunity to go beyond the cap, whereas maybe a smaller market team doesn't. There's a lot to unpack when you look at this. The way it's worked out for the Lightning, though, it was certainly a silver lining for them losing, their best offensive player, in my opinion, to a serious injury. It was a silver lining that's worked out incredible, and it's become a fact, partly because, Florida was so good this year. They had such a breakout year. The management team there did such an awesome job. I mean, Billy Zito did a great job. And then Rick Dudley and Paul Fenton and Sonny Mehta, Brett Peterson, they brought in all these new people and they made, some incredible decisions for that club, for Hagee, getting Radko Gudas, bringing in Forsling. I mean, they made a ton of great moves, and all of a sudden it feels like it's being unwound, and some of the blame in the media is going to, well, Kucherov's back. Yeah, it's not all that. Tampa Bay Lightning are a pretty good team. They still have some pretty good players aside from that. But, if truth be told, Florida really should have won that first game, Kipper. They should have.
That one might be the one that got away in this series. One more thought on this, and I think you touched on it briefly, but just to flesh it out a little bit more, just prior to this whole salary cap thing, it was always the same old big market teams, Rangers, Leafs, Montreal free agency that just outbid everybody else and had that advantage, that financial advantage. And since then, it's been stripped for the New York Rangers and many of them who had to, couldn't take advantage of their wealth. Is this just another chance now? Because Toronto, with even Riley Nash, who was close to $3 million, that's a contract you would never have been able to trade for if he was healthy. But he's on the long-term IR. You get to hide him until the cap doesn't matter. That's an advantage for these teams that can go and spend the money and put it on the sidelines. I got to think it feels good for them for the first time to take advantage of having money.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, if you look at the history of the league, we had teams like the Detroit Red Wings that a long time ago were spending 70, 80, 90 million dollars on salary. So the world has certainly changed. It's flattened out. It's become more competitive. What Toronto was able to do, quite frankly, is more egregious, really, than, in my opinion, what Tampa was able to do. And yet I will tell you that what Toronto did is 100% permissible within the rules in the CBA.
Yes.
Specifically regarding the article on the salary cap. Again, those are things to me that the National Hockey League is always monitoring. You don't want to see anybody be able to take advantage of something that way. If it continues to happen, then those are things that, like any system, when you're trying to appease so many different masters, so to speak, so many different interests, you're not going to get it 100% right every time. You're going to have to make adjustments along the way. The Riley Nash one was interesting. Yes, absolutely. A lot of people, didn't understand what was going on there. I can tell you back in 2009, we traded Ole Kolzig to the Toronto Maple Leafs, and we gave him a 4th-round pick. For us, it was about reducing some of the money on our cap. For Toronto, it was about acquiring an asset for it. People could have said that's circumvention, but it wasn't. It was fully permissible within the rules. And now we see those types of things actually commonplace today. We saw the San Jose Sharks jump in a couple trades this year. And Doug Wilson has been talking about that was part of his plan. Some people could say that was circumvention, but it's 100% permissible by what's in the rules. Doug Wilson, when they're not having a great year, it's his option, if he can convince ownership to spend a little money and maybe get involved in some of these trades as a third party, because the cap is so tight that people can't do it without any help, that they can pick up some assets. And I thought Doug Wilson did a really nice job with that. I didn't hear anybody complaining about it because it wasn't on a huge scale, but all these things are the same. They're all part of what goes into the incredible challenge for not just the National Hockey League, but for the Players Association to constantly be monitoring the oversight of how things are administrated. For me, to be honest with you, I think the salary cap, in terms of how it's functioned, has been an A for the National Hockey League. I won't say A plus, because you do have things like this come up. They have to be adjusted, and then you keep going.
A for the owners.
No, I think
you want to ask Ovechkin to grade it?
Yes. I mean, and again, it'd be easy to say yes, A for the owners, because Alex Ovechkin is worth $20 million, or Sidney Crosby was in the early goings, or Connor McDavid is today. And I don't disagree that some of the top players probably have had to take less money than they definitely have had to take less money than they would in an open market. But now you're into, is it better for the game? I didn't hear the star players stand up and say, I won't do it. Hockey is like the one sport left in the world, in my opinion, Kyper, where your top guys will give back or give in or go along for the betterment of the game. And I do think that's what makes the National Hockey League so unique.
To bring this full circle, it might have been Kucherov that said, if it means that we get to try to win another Stanley Cup, I'll take the regular season off. It's that simple. It could be that simple. But
yeah, I think that's a bridge too far for me. I don't think that he had the power to singularly say, well, I'll just take the year off so that we win another Stanley Cup. I mean, he was legitimately injured.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody's questioning that. It happened. Did he delay his rehab? Not that I know of.
Yeah.
I don't know, but the timing is
Yeah, that's
certainly,
fair.
yeah.
That's fair. Even though the optics around it could look much different, I do agree with you that there's just no way that you could hide, a surgery of that
No,
magnitude
no.
and the length that it takes to come back. Incredible game one. Lots. We've been hurt, me and you. Long-term injuries, short-term injuries, but 7 months off to come in those first two games, put Tampa Bay up 2-0, put the Florida Panthers on their heels. I don't think even the best of the experts could have predicted that.
No, I heard a lot of, our compadres saying, well, you got to give them a few games to get going. How about like a period?
About a warm-up.
How about a warm up? And he was ready to go right out of the box. And that's somewhat a testament to today's athletes. Not like it used to be where, okay, you go back, you start playing, you get yourself back in shape on the fly. These guys are grinding. The science that we're using, the ability for players to play at a higher level, harder, faster, stronger, it's all evident in the game. And Kucherov is an incredible hockey player that, his genius is based off of his mind as a hockey player. He's just got an incredible ability to read the
Yeah.
play.
All right, let's dive into this series. Lots. For the first two games, Tampa Bay showing two different looks. One that showed the offense going toe-to-toe with Kucherov, point, all the guys firing on all cylinders. And then last night, more defensive, shutting down Barkov, Huberdeau, and then getting it done with Vasilevsky. A complete game for Tampa Bay to go up 2-0 against a team that was feeling really good coming into this series. And I'm not sure where their psyche is right now in terms of the Panthers.
Having been a player, this as well as anybody, having been in these types of big games, even though it's the first round, it would be part of the game plan for the coaching staff for Florida to try to keep that psyche up, to try to keep the confidence level up, to not undo what was an incredible regular season for the Florida Panthers. They're going to need that if they want to get back into this series. Now they find themselves in a really a must-win game. They must win game 3 on the road in Tampa against the team that just brought back their star player, has the best goaltender in the National Hockey League, in my opinion, the best defenseman in the National Hockey League, in my opinion, and he may be playing the second best D on the team right now because Ryan McDonough, just has an incredible ability to elevate in the playoffs. And we've seen that on full display. He's been a monster in these first two games, just an absolute miserable human being to have to play against. And that's pretty darn impressive for him and valuable for Tampa.
I want to talk to you a little bit about goaltending. I try to explain this time of year to people what it's like if you have a goalie that you don't believe in, and whether or not you've got a Connor McDavid or a Scheifele or a Nathan McKinnon. We've been on teams lots where if they're not at the top of their game, or even if they're struggling, they can't score, you still feel like you can win a hockey game. There's no one individual skater out there that could struggle and you still don't feel like you can't find a way to win unless it's your goaltender. You could have the best power play. You could be going on all firing on all cylinders. You can have a hot score. But if you don't believe in a guy when the puck is in your own zone between the pipes, you're done. You're finished. And it wasn't that Bobrovsky was horrible in game 1. But for Joel Quenneville to pull him and put in Drieger, there's only one reason why, is because the guys in front don't believe in the guy between the pipes. That's the only reason why you made a change as early as game 1. Agree or disagree?
I haven't talked to Quinny about that. I don't know that it was, if it was predetermined and the players knew about it, it's fine. My suspicion is it wasn't. Bobrovsky made some good strides from a horrific first year with Florida. Let's be honest. That first year was not good. This year he came back. I thought he played much better. Chris Driedger also played terrific, as did Spencer Knight when he got in there. But ultimately, if Florida is going to beat the Lightning, they need exactly what you're describing. They need exactly what Marc-Andre Fleury has given to Vegas in the first two games. They're 1-1 in that series, but I don't think there's a player on that team in Vegas's case that doesn't believe that they've got a goalie that is going to do everything he can. He won't score any goals, but he's going to make our jobs a little bit easier, and we got to stick with the process. I'm not sure Florida has it. I personally, I love everything Florida did. I tipped my cap to them. I thought they would be in tough against Tampa, with or without Kucherov.
So,
it's obviously more difficult with him, but I truly believe that, Kipper. And a number of people asked me, and that's what I said. I said, nice year for Florida. You know, if you really go back and look at who goes on and wins the Stanley Cup, generally what you'll find is teams that are, you know, it's a run up to it. You don't see a lot of years where someone just bursts out like Florida. Florida, to me, huge strides forward this year. I'd be really surprised if they won the Stanley Cup. Not because they didn't have a record that wasn't good enough or a season that wasn't good enough, but there's some learning that has to be acquired on the job, going through the process, losing along the way. Generally, that's what history says when you look at the numbers. The teams that win have been good. They've had real good winning percentages for a number of years. They've had some failure in the playoffs and they break through, a la the Tampa Bay Lightning. Made it to the finals in 15, took till last year for them to win a cup. You know, and some teams never get there. The San Jose Sharks, they had about 6, 7, 8 years of that type of ability, made it to the finals, didn't get over the hump. For Florida to get over the hump this year, and win the cup, I think would be incredibly difficult. I thought they'd be in tough. They got an unfavorable draw with Tampa, and yet I can't imagine that Carolina would have been any easier either. So it was tough circumstances. They still have a chance, but game 3 is must win for the Florida Panthers.
So Bobrovsky doesn't give you, he gives up 5 in game 1, doesn't come up with the big save when you need it the most against Point late on the game-winning goal. You go to Chris Driedger, solid, bad bounce on the opening goal. What do you do now if you're Zito and Joel Quenneville here? I'm watching Hockey Night in Canada. Elliott threw out Spencer Knight, and I'm shaking my head going,
They're not going to go to Spencer Knight.
You're going.
He could play. You're going not next game.
Lots. You're Joel Quenneville, and you need 3 different goalies in the first 3 games, and none of them are hurt. It looks bad.
I would say he's Spencer Knight to me. Hey, you never know what Quinny's going to do, but a lot of thought will go into it. I know that with Joel. But I also think Joel deferred to a little bit more veteran player, like a lot of the veteran coaches. So to me, Spencer Knight is out of the equation for game 3. He may not be out for game 4.
Well, but if you're down 3-0, you might want to give the kid a little bit of an experience to know what's coming down, the pike pretty fast.
Yeah,
because he is the goalie of the future.
Right, and everybody knows that Florida has to protect Bobrovsky. Therefore, they have to figure out what they'll do with Driedger. And yet they have a younger goalie that looks like he's the goalie of the future in the waiting and is, surprised a lot of people by getting in games this year after signing out of Boston College and by doing so well in those games. So those are good problems to have for a National Hockey League team.
Okay,
but
with the one exception.
For me, it's Driedger.
Okay.
Go ahead.
With the one exception is that you still owe tens of millions of dollars on Bobrovsky. If he can't find a way to get back in the net, can we finally look at this experiment saying it's over? Find a way to get rid of this guy. because he will never, ever be the guy that we thought we signed at $10 million a year.
Well, if there's one thing I've learned in this game, never ever say never. Okay, so he's got what, 5 years left at $10 million. Is that right? 4 years left, I believe. No, 5.
I think he's been there 4 full years. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
We'll double check.
No, so he's got, let's see. He signed last year was that first year of a 7-year deal. So he's got 5 years left after this year at $10 million with a very heavily signing bonus laden contract. That's going to be next to impossible to move.
Ugh.
So now you've got to figure out what to do with him. And these are challenges that managers are dealing with different players. We saw a guy move that I thought played exceptional last night that I thought would never move because he was on such a long contract, and that was Jeff Carter.
Wow,
now
he's
been fantastic. He's also in the last year of his deal next year. So the risk was minimized. If Bobrovsky was in the last year of his deal, I think you'd be able to move him easily. But because of where he's at in the cycle and how he's played, he becomes an untradeable player, and not because he has a no move clause, because nobody else would absorb that contract right now. That doesn't mean that Florida couldn't say, hey, you know what? We got a young goalie we're going to pay less than $1 million to. He's on an ELS. We got Chris Driedger. We could maybe trade this guy and pay X amount of it. You can pay up to 50%. Would you ever want to be on the hook for $5 million for 5 more years for a player? No, we've never seen anything to that degree happen, but you might see them say we'd pay 2 or 3, and that might be the best solution for us. Those are hard decisions for general managers to make, except when you're not the general manager that signed the contract, which is the position that Billy Zito finds himself in. So he could certainly consider it. I still find it unlikely that anything happens. I think the end result will be, it's too early. We got to give him another shot. Spencer Knight could use more time in the minors. We're going to lose Driedger probably anyhow, so we probably could use Spencer if we wanted in a backup role. I think you make the most of it and you plod forward.
Well, we'll see as early as Game 3 whether or not Panthers can find a way to kind of crawl back into this thing. Probably my guess would, yeah, to your point, if you gotta stick with Bobrovsky and you see no light at the end of the tunnel in terms of getting rid of him anytime soon, maybe you run it right across the full circle here and go back to Bobrovsky in Game 3. Yeah. But regardless, they're going to need someone to steal a game in what should be a very, very busy and loud Tampa Bay arena for Game 3. Okay, Lots, let's move it. Let's go closer to home for you with the Minnesota Wild.
Okay.
And Vegas. And that's another one that's got great intrigue for no other reason. There seems to be a psychological huge advantage that Minnesota have over Vegas, more so than any other team. Now, with the series tied at 1, they go back to Minnesota, where the home record over the course of the last 3 years has been unbelievable for Minnesota against Vegas. They're in their heads, and which made Game 2, I think, that much more impressive out of Vegas, especially when they give up the first goal to Dumba, only to have Marchessault come back, 19 seconds after that to get them back in. I thought that was huge for no other reason. It didn't take a lot of time to get in Vegas's head with the 1-0 lead.
Yeah, honestly, if Minnesota could have held the fort down for 2, 3, 4 minutes,
yes,
I think they probably go on and win that game. But because
I don't disagree,
Vegas responded so quickly, I think it kind of raised the chest of all the Vegas players. Say, okay, I think we got this. We got this. Marc-Andre Fleury's playing out of his mind. We're a veteran group. We finished 2nd overall in the National Hockey League, tied with the Colorado Avalanche in points. They had more regulation wins. We're right there. We're a good team. That instant reaction had to be a jolt of energy through the body that you and I have felt many times as players. And it's on. You got this. Well, Vegas had it in the end. Minnesota is a disastrous matchup for Vegas. Vegas is a big, good skating, aggressive team, but Minnesota has a lot of those elements too. Minnesota has a better decor than Vegas does, and they went out and signed, Stanley Cup champion captain Alex Pietrangelo to bolster that decor. But Minnesota's been underrated with their decor, and their forwards are bigger than they get credit for. They've got the one incredible line with Marcus Foligno, Jordan Greenway, and Joel Eriksson Ek that is just absolute misery to play against. They've been incredibly effective. Joel Eriksson Ek, of course, scores the goal in the first game. And when it comes to actually drilling down and saying, okay, well, why isn't Vegas, having more success? They're not generating a lot of quality scoring chances, in my opinion. And the numbers bear that out. They're getting shots, but they're not the type of shots that you'd like to see. Minnesota, on the other hand, is not getting as many shots, but they're getting quality opportunities. They're more of a threat to score on any given shift than Vegas is right now. And, to be fair to Vegas, they're without Max Pacioretty, and it really shows.
Especially with Stone. There's not much you don't love about Mark Stone, but there seems to be a little bit of a struggle here, and I was never a huge Pacioretty fan, and I thought they completely put him in a position to fail in Montreal, starting with the captaincy, and just having expectations way over his head in terms of what you really want him. And it's been a perfect fit in Vegas because he isn't the captain. He's not the go-to guy. He can kind of come in and quietly score his goals and just do his thing. But you've really noticed now the loss of Pacioretty in that shot and the ability to score from 30 or 40 feet out. And I think it's had its toll on Stone.
No doubt about it. I mean, Max Pacioretty played 48 games this year, had 24 goals, 40 goal pace.
Yeah.
For a team that doesn't score a lot, that's tough to replace. And Vegas overwhelms you with their physicality and their speed and their up tempo. They don't do that to the Minnesota Wild. The Minnesota Wild has one of the best top 4 skating Ds in the league, right up there with the best in the league. I'm not saying they're 1 or 2 or even 3, but they're in the top 5. And that came through this year. Billy Guerin has done an excellent job of making some really difficult decisions with this franchise, pushing the boundaries on what the standards have been for this organization. They took a huge step forward. In order for them to get recognized as much as they should this year, they kind of have to win this first round. Otherwise, they're going to have to reprove it again. I think they'll be able to, and that may happen, and it won't really change things other than the recognition that the franchise gets for the strides that they've made in a short period of time. They got rid of players that they thought were guys that would lead them to the promised land: Granlund, Jason Zucker, Nino Niederreiter. And they brought in, maybe at times some players that people would consider guys that aren't as good as some of those players. Certainly Victor Rask would fall in that category, and he had a terrific year for the Wild. But even guys like Ian Cole, Nick Bodino, these guys are grizzled veterans that know what it takes to win in the playoffs, that brought that attitude in the regular season, and it's really benefited the Minnesota Wild.
You wonder now if teams have watched the last few years and look at their goaltending structure moving forward and think, I don't need a superstar in that, but if I can find a Cam Talbot, and it's still hard to imagine that Cam Talbot can beat Marc-Andre Fleury, especially with where Flower is at the first 2 games. And he's been lights out. He's as good as he's ever been in his career. Yet Cam Talbot could knock out Vegas and Marc-Andre Fleury because, his team's that strong, and you might not have to have Cam Talbot stand on his head but certainly, not give up the bad goal. But you understand what I'm saying here, Lots? You don't need
100%.
$10 million goalies like a Carey Price anymore, or Bobrovsky, that you want find a Cam Talbot at 3 or 4 million.
Yeah.
And
The
still
smart
win.
money, or the smart general managers around the National Hockey League have recognized, and it's statistical, that most of these guys, it's pretty tightly contested, right? When you really look at how goalies have done, goalies are up and down. There's been a ton of guys that have great years, not as good. This, that, or the other thing. Mike Smith, the year he's had, that's incredible. But the 10 million, we have two $10 million goalies, right? Carey Price and Sergei Bobrovsky. How do you feel about those two guys right now leading your franchise?
Oh.
Not
how quickly could you get out of that contract if you had the chance? Is the question.
Right. I think what we're finding, Cam Talbot signed for 3.3 for 3 years. He's been everything the Minnesota Wild could have hoped for. Kaapo Kähkönen, to be fair to him, had a terrific year too. They've got a great D. Devin Dubnyk. Devin went through a lot of things personally the last couple of years, and I think that hurt his performance here. And those things happen. There's nothing you can do about it. But they got two guys that have played at a slightly higher level than Devin was, and it really worked for their team. And they didn't pay an arm and a leg for it. It's given the Minnesota Wild a lot of flexibility. It's good management, in my opinion. The Marty Brodeurs, the Patrick Roys, these guys were incredible. And for a long time, general managers have craved to have those guys back. But now I think they've come to realize that it's not in the salary cap world. You want to have as good a goalie as you can. That's Vasilevsky right now for me. But if you can't have Vasilevsky, then you just want to have a guy that's very tightly in the middle of the group that can give you what you need, and you don't want to spend a ton on it because you can strengthen the rest of your team to artificially prop your goalie up. And to some degree, and I don't want to be disrespectful to Cam Talbot because he had an awesome year, but to some degree, that's what Minnesota was able to do with their group. Their commitment to D as a group was outstanding. Their D-core is outstanding, and the combination of those two, along with a guy like Cam Talbot, who is a very good goaltender, but there's a reason why he signed for 3.3, has been smart management by the Minnesota Wild.
Going to be a long one, Lots.
Yes.
How can you not see this thing going 7 games? It'll be a lot of fun.
I thought it was a pick'em series to start. I took the Minnesota Wild, partly because I'm here in town and I support
took
the
too.
Wild. Yeah, but I did. I absolutely did. I put my name to it and said, yeah, you know what? I'll take the Wild, which has to be, in a lot of people's eyes, other than maybe like Nashville beating Carolina, it would be one of the true big upsets.
Minnesota
Certainly
Wild
in the first round.
Minnesota Wild 6-0-2 home all time versus Vegas. So no 3-on-3 hockey in overtime to save them. That's that first goal.
And Vegas had a chance to change that, Kipper, down the stretch. They played them like 3 times in the final 10 games.
Yeah.
And they could not. They got one overtime win. If they had won in regulation, they'd be playing the St. Louis Blues and the Colorado Avalanche, who are as bad as Minnesota is a matchup for Vegas. Colorado is as bad a matchup for Minnesota. So both teams wanted to win those games. Vegas was without Max Pacioretty for those games, but they couldn't get it done.
Well,
so there's nowhere else to look but in the mirror for Vegas.
I picked many in this series for no other reason from what you just said. I think that stuff comes back to bite you in the ass. And we'll see. We'll see. Even the energy of having to play with 15 skaters,
right.
all of that, right? Mismanaging, or running out of cap space, mismanaging that. That stuff comes back, I think, to haunt you sometimes. And we'll see as early as game 3.
To be fair to Vegas, there are some. There's one small issue that we've talked about for a while, and that is the lack of ability down the stretch to be able to put guys on LTI.
Yeah.
For your salary cap purposes. So if you get if you're tight to the cap and you get injuries, particularly down those last 10 games, it's not that hard to end up playing less than a full roster. Vegas did have those types of injuries, and it did bite them a little bit in the rear end. I understand the salary cap inside and out. I'm not as critical on them for that. That's just something that exists in the cap, and you can't do anything about it. Particularly when Bill Foley's done such a great job with this franchise. I mean, he's green lighted everything they could possibly do to be good, and they've been one of the best stories in sports, literally
Great
around
ride so far.
Yeah, incredible around the world. I mean,
Yeah.
Vegas making the Stanley Cup Finals their first year was one of the best things
Yes.
that happened for hockey. I was over in London at that time, staying in a hotel where Sidney Crosby was staying. I would see Sid every morning, and finally I would ask the people, "Do you know who that guy is?" And they're like, yeah, he's some kind of hockey player. Sid loved being in London because people didn't recognize him as freely as he's used to. I said, yeah. What do you guys know about hockey? Oh, we know about Vegas and their run to the finals. Like it was an event that was really well publicized around the world, and certainly for England, where I think Leicester just won their championship in a miracle run, it really resonated with people there. So to me, Vegas has really been one of the best things the National Hockey League has done in the last 15, 20 years.
And it's continuing in terms of the belief that this is a team that's legitimate, could get to a Stanley Cup final again, if not win it. So we'll watch that closely as they get going again tomorrow night. I want to switch it over to the North Division. 6 of 8 of the series well underway, but still nothing from the North. That changes tonight with Winnipeg and Edmonton. Ehlers and Pierre-Luc Dubois made the trip to Edmonton, but still no word, at least as I'm doing this show. I had said about a week ago that Ehlers wasn't expected to start. Do they push him now? Do they feel like they have to have him in the lineup if it's at 65 or 70%? That wouldn't be the first time in Stanley Cup playoff history that's happened, but I think it's unlikely that we'll see Ehlers. I don't know how Winnipeg can go in there and maybe steal a couple other than Connor Hellebuck. Lots.
It's going to come down to Connor Hellebuck, who, hasn't played his best hockey against Edmonton, nor have a lot of goalies this year in the North, just by virtue of, their 2-star players and the way that these guys can light you up on any given night. But I'd be more surprised if at least one of those guys doesn't play than I would be if they don't. Because I believe what you just said is 100% accurate, that they need a shot in the arm. They need these guys aren't going to play type mentality, and then boom, they know all along they're going to play. That does happen occasionally. You got to. That's in the DNA of this game. You're kind of the reporting is so much better that it happens a lot less than it used to, but it's still a possibility for something like this in a playoff game. So don't be surprised if one of those two guys is in the lineup. If they're not, I think Winnipeg is solely relying, as you just said, on Connor Hellebuck to steal at least a game or two until these guys can come back and maybe give Winnipeg a shot in the arm, because they were really a train wreck the last 10, 12 games of the season with some of these injuries. And they had a terrific year prior to that. But, in a year like this, when you're playing so many games and there's so many different moving parts, Winnipeg did a great job until those two injuries crept into the equation.
We know Connor McDavid is the best player in the world, and that's a challenge for any team, any night, to keep this guy under 2.5, 3 points a game. It's going to be phenomenal in terms of Winnipeg trying to slow this guy down. I don't think you can stop him. But when you think about now McDavid versus Mark Scheifele or a Draisaitl and up against Pierre-Luc Dubois, is Adam Lowry maybe the X factor here? Because when we look at the middle of the ice on paper, we like Winnipeg a little deeper. And I include when I go down the middle of the ice, I look at your top 3 centermen and your goaltender. Is that still, do we still like Winnipeg an awful lot here down the middle?
Well, it's certainly been a strength for them all year long, and I think it's a big reason why Winnipeg was able to have the type of season that they had. But when you got Scheifele, even though Paul Stastny isn't necessarily at the level he used to be, he's still he's a gamer. He's a veteran. He's got great hockey IQ. Andrew Kopp's had a good year. It gives them a little bit of bite, in their second line. And then Adam Lowry is a guy that generally can win his matchups, can be a difference maker. So he's going to have to be a monster in the series. I actually think they're going to end up using him at times against Leon and Connor, and maybe try to get Scheifele or Stastny out there to try to play level with Adam Lowry against either of those guys would be a huge benefit for the Winnipeg Jets. If they can stay out of the box and keep the combination of Draisaitl and McDavid off the ice until maybe you force the team into trying to have to pair them together, then things would be going really well for Winnipeg if that happens. But it's going to be a tough assignment for them. Achilles heel for Edmonton. Mike Smith's had an incredible year, but if he gets hurt or has a couple of off games, that's a disaster for them. They don't have a lot of depth back there. If somehow Winnipeg could figure out what Montreal was able to do for 3 straight games against Edmonton, which was shut down Connor McDavid and Draisaitl to a major effect, then that would be disastrous for Edmonton. Edmonton, to me, is a team that looks like they're going to win some Stanley Cups. I'm not sold it's this year. And I watch every single game that team plays. And I talk to their coach very regularly, who's done an incredible job, Dave Tippett. But I still think Ken Holland's got a little bit of work to do on that roster. I think he knows it. He's done an incredible job to get them where they're at. But they're not quite there yet to fully take advantage of the 2 elite players they have on the roster.
Lutz, this is a question I wouldn't have dared ask you at the beginning of the season, but who's got the better blue line right now? Because I've watched a Darnell Nurse turned into something I didn't think I'd see. And I liked him, but I probably had him at the beginning of the season as a very good 3-4, and he's turned himself into a 1-2.
Absolutely. He has. And when you really dive into that one and you look at, how does a guy at that age all of a sudden take that big a step forward? It takes a while for D, but they normally don't take this type of jump. Darnell was a guy that's an excellent skater. He's got good hands, a little bit prone at times to making, a disastrous blunder. He's almost completely eliminated that from his game. His offense is elite now. The way he scored goals this year, his ability to join the rush at the right times, it's completely unnatural and almost unnerving to think that a guy went through that big a change at this stage in his career. And yet, when you talk to some of the players on the team and people around the organization, he is a guy that is devoted to improving his game. He's got an athletic background through his family. He understands the value of video. He's a pretty good self-evaluator, in my opinion, just watching the changes he's been able to make. He's put the hard work in, like a lot of guys do, but he's got rewarded for it because there's so much in the package of him athletically as an athlete. And that's what's really shown through. And I believe that's why he took a huge step up. I have to credit Tyson Barrie as well. They've been a good pair together. Tyson Barrie's come in and had a terrific year. Tyson did what some other players should have done, which is he didn't really worry about how much he got paid. He worried about going to a spot that was a great fit for him. That would be a great opportunity for him to re-put value back into his career. And that's exactly what Tyson did. At $3.75 million, that was a pretty economical signing for a guy with Tyson's pedigree. And yet you never heard a word about it. He never blinked twice on it. He just did it and said, you know what? It's a truncated season. I didn't play great in Toronto. It's a pretty spotlight team. So it's not like it didn't get noticed. I got to rebuild myself back to where I am, and the Edmonton Oilers are my best chance to do that. And he took that challenge, and it's really paid off for him.
We give the advantage to Edmonton's blue line over Josh Morrissey and company.
I will. I like Josh Morrissey. I like Neil Pionk. I like some of the changes that Winnipeg has made back there. I mean, they had such a disastrous offseason a couple of years ago, and they literally lost, 3 of the top 4 best D on that blue line, and it's taken them a while to rebound, but they've done some really good things in that direction. And you can see the progress, and you got to compliment Winnipeg on that. But Dave Tippett is a master of teaching the defensive game. Jim Playfair has done an awesome job with the D-corps there, and it shows. And that's why Edmonton never really came off the rails this year. They had a couple of stretches where they were teetering, and the coaching staff pulled them back. And I think
a little bit of
the
tough
players
start.
recognize that.
Tough start too.
3-6-3, and everybody wrote the team off.
Yeah,
and they pulled it back on the rails, and then they were really dominant. They had a couple stretches in between being dominant against Montreal, one other one that stands out, but it never went sideways. And you and I know how that is as former players. You can tell once you cross that line, it's hard to get it back. They never went across that line. They got their game back. They stayed focused. They had a terrific year. A lot of people, I picked them to finish second or third right from the start, and I got ridiculed for it. I did not have Montreal in the playoffs. I had them as more 5th, 6th. Thought Calgary or Vancouver would beat them. And I got ridiculed at the beginning of the year. Lo and behold, water kind of found its level for me when it was all said and done.
All right, Lots, we can't let you go without mentioning for those beloved Montreal Canadian fans and Toronto Maple Leaf fans where this series goes after game 1 tomorrow night. And the feeling, at least I have, and I'm sure others have, is Montreal's only got one chance. That, of course, besides the obvious Carey Price, is that they're going to have to run the shit out of the Toronto Maple Leafs. And I don't necessarily think that they have the lineup to do that. Josh Anderson can start a fire, but I'm not sure if there's anyone else in the lineup that can do damage to the Toronto Maple Leafs. So where does Montreal go from here?
To me, it feels like Montreal's been all in from the first minute of this season. And they had a great start, went a little sideways, couldn't get it back on the rails, fired a coach. Haven't really seen any massive differences. They've had some real positive events. Cole Caulfield coming to the mix. I think that's a guy that looks like he's going to help them, and yet he's not going to be playing in the first game. You
like that? You're okay with that?
I'm okay with that in Cole's case. I'm not okay with it in Romanov's case. I just think he's a guy that should be in the lineup. That doesn't, make any sense to me. Kotkaniemi, the other player that, literally Montreal kind of went outside the box and just made it publicly known. We're not dressing these guys, which I don't know if they're trying to tell me these are not our most confident or most physical players. I don't know what they're going for there. I haven't asked Berge about that.
Yeah, that's a great question. Why 24 hours before do you make this announcement? Everybody else's game time decision we don't have to tell you. But like this, to me, Kotkaniemi as a top pick, this is a major setback in his development. Is it not?
It is. At the same time, to be fair to Dominic Ducharme and Marc Bergeron, I don't feel like they, you know how it is. Once you lose your level of accountability, he's had a really rough stretch.
Wow. He came back. We talked about the bubble last year, that he went away during the first wave of the pandemic. He came back stronger. He was running people over in the Pittsburgh series. They beat Pittsburgh. And this guy's an everyday player now. Now, a year later, he can't start game 1 of the playoffs. What are you telling me about this guy?
It could be a combination of, they're just so amped up there to have to win a playoff round. They first had to get in the playoffs, I feel like, as an organization. Now I feel like it's a signal that they have to win. Will that change the outcome? No, I don't think so. I don't think that has any bearing on it. What will play out is, do they have a good enough team to win? For me, it'll be an iconic matchup that may play into their favor, but they're significant underdogs. They're not underdogs to the point where they can't win, but I'll be shocked if they do. I really will. The makeup of their team to now maybe go along with the gamesmanship, or make a statement that we're not going to play some of these guys that, like I said, maybe aren't as physical, maybe aren't as confident, whatever. We're going to go with more veterans. It's going to be old school hockey. We're going to grind it out.
Oh.
I just don't think that if you were a player on Toronto, you would be going, oh my gosh, this is going to be a really rough ride. Now, you don't want to face Shea Weber, I admit it, and Ben Sherrod can play heavy, but, overall, you wouldn't be quaking in your boots.
Yeah, we'll just have to keep an eye on a guy like Corey Perry against Jack Campbell. I see that one shaping up pretty good.
Yeah, they've got some elements. It's not like they're completely naked in that area, but it's not the Philadelphia Broad Street Bullies either coming at you.
But it's been a good first round so far, and we have seen we see physicality that we just don't see during the regular season. And maybe they're just smarter than us. They're sitting back going, what do I want to kick the shit out of? Why do we want to kick the shit out of each other for regular season, man? Let's just save it for the playoffs. That way, when they're our age now, they're not going, oh my, I can't even move my shoulder.
True. I would also say adding fans back in has been a game changer. I really believe that for the players in the first round. That Florida game was so great. The hockey was great. The atmosphere was great, and it mattered. Carolina
12,000 people. You know what's crazy about it too, Lots, is as players, it was there for us. It was just, you never talked about it. You never thought about it. It was just part of the element, and it was a great part of the element. But you never really, truly, I think, appreciate it until it's taken away. And I think that's the case here. Is that
great point?
It's such a source of energy. We didn't even know it was a source of energy because we just took it for granted that it was always there.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And for me, I liked to play tennis when I was younger. Besides hockey, I was like I didn't want to be Jimmy Connors or John McEnroe. I wanted to be like Borg or Lendl. You just, like, you never thought, I never, ever, ever. People would always say as a hockey player, what was it like to play in front of 15, 18, 20,000 fans? And my honest answer was always the same. You know what? I never really thought about it. You just do what you do. Yeah. You're prepared. You're trying to focus. Never thought about it. And yet remove it, and it stuck out like a sore thumb. This is terrible.
Yeah.
This is awful. God, we miss the fans. They're such a big part of the game that they never got the credit. And everybody's always talked about, we love our fans. We love our fans. Well, hockey players truly do love their fans, as do basketball and all the other sports that we're missing their fans. But it's been highlighted to a new level. And I do think in hockey, where emotions really run high as any sport on the planet, it has made a significant difference just early on in these playoffs.
There is some talk about maybe Montreal late in the first round getting 2,500 people in Montreal. I don't think that's the case in Toronto. I don't know what's going on in Alberta. But you wonder if, say, a team like Toronto does advance to a conference final, has to go down to the States, and they've gone from no fans to this environment, if that somehow hurts them in any way, shape, or form, because, Lots, we've been on the road before in the playoffs against hostile crowds. And I got to tell you that it's such a great feeling to get out of Dodge. And hopefully you in the playoffs, when you're on the road, you get out of Dodge with a win, maybe two, but you can't wait to go back home. You've been exhausted. You've had shit thrown at you. You've been called every name. and you're just so happy to jump on a plane and go home. I just don't know if Leaf fans or Oiler fans, if they've had, or players that haven't had that and go into that environment, how that can play with you a little bit.
Yeah, when I look at Toronto, I see a team, to be, just completely transparent, that I think would really benefit from fans. I think there's a lot of guys that, it gets the juices flowing when they do the things they do, and they get
but you want your own
by the
fans.
response.
You want
You
your
want
own
your own
fans.
fans. Yeah, no doubt about it. But I think that they've got a lot of big time players, and they've got a lot of guys that will deliver in that moment. And for me, I have no information on this, but does Toronto not end up playing like in a Detroit or a Buffalo?
Yeah, I would assume
something like that.
But who's going to go
I don't know
watch
anything
that?
about that. Well, depending on how Canadians are treated at the border. 18,000 Canadians from Toronto will definitely go to Buffalo
and then quarantine for 2 weeks.
Yes. They might just stay down there.
One game.
That changes. I have to say this because I haven't been hard on Canadians, but at one point I don't know why I said it. I just said, geez, I just don't see any science as to why a truck driver could come into Canada and, he's driving around, and a hockey player who's in a bubble comes in and he needs to stay in a hotel for 2 weeks. It did change literally right after that. But the fact of the matter is I feel for my brethren north of the border. I feel
I can't
for
even
you.
Golf. I can't golf.
Yeah. I feel for you and a lot of Canadians, and it's been rough. And
well, we appreciate it.
Yeah, it's not my job as an American to judge what the Canadian government does. So I'm going to stay away from that. I feel badly. I work with people like Jackie Redmond and Mike Johnson at NHL Network that are Canadians. Jackie goes back and forth, and I feel for her and really everybody throughout the country. Nobody knows what the right answers are. It's right now here in Minnesota, there's tremendous joy, because as of last Friday, they lifted the mask mandate, and you can really feel with the population. I'm hopeful, and I'm wishing for that soon for all Canadians.
Well, we're hopeful too. Our numbers are going down, and we hope we can get to that finish line now at June 2nd for this lockdown.
That would be awesome.
So we're hanging in there, but you're not judging Canadian government, but we're glad that you're judging NHL hockey here with us.
That I will judge.
And
I know equally as much about the Canadian government as I do hockey, which isn't much, but I will still give you my opinion.
We've exhausted you the last hour on it. That flew by. Really appreciate it. I'll try to track down Doug McLean. Tell him how great you were in the last hour. He'll love that.
Send him a copy of the tape, would you?
I will.
We'll sign.
Oh, he's every time he's watching just to make sure he's coming. Hey, he did a good job. He didn't do a good job. He's always busting balls. Every day.
Yeah, boring.
You think he's got internet? Boring. You think he's got internet in the RV?
Yeah, he has Jill with the phone out the window trying to get some reception. That's how it goes.
Brian, can't thank you enough, man. Really appreciate your time, your insight, both from a general manager's perspective, an agent's, and of course, an NHL career. So thanks again for doing this, Lots. Enjoy the games tonight.
My pleasure, Kipper. Thanks for having me on.
Brian Lawton from the state of Minnesota. Thanks for joining us. Joe and Jordan, always a pleasure to have you. I hope everybody had a great time today listening to Brian get you teed up for all the games tonight. Interesting conversation on Kucherov and where Tampa Bay is going, but there's no denying, man, they have got a rock solid hockey club. And right now they look like they're heading towards a second Stanley Cup. I know it's early, but man, they've been impressive for the first 2 games. First time watcher, hit the subscribe button so you know all the latest here on the Real Kyper at Noon show. Hit the like button. And guess what? We'll be back here on Friday. Enjoy the North Division. All the action starts tonight with Edmonton and Winnipeg. Have a great day, everybody.